Greetings, YouTube, and welcome to a video that's kind of exciting and kind of anxiety-ridden as well. Kind of like the Marvel Contest of Champions experience, right? Like imagine fighting Darkhawk this month. Sometimes you bait that special 2 right away, and it's a pretty easy fight, and sometimes you get wrecked and rage quit the game, or you get forced to rage quit the game thanks to serious lag issues that I don't feel like a lot of YouTubers have discussed. But don't worry, your voices have been heard, at least to me, and I have heard of some serious damaging lag on many phones, especially for those of you who were seemingly lucky enough to pull Darkhawk, but now his biggest power just seems to be to shut down your game randomly in mid-fight. Oh, those Power Rangers, they just have all sorts of tricks up their sleeve. But we did get this announcement, and I'll be pinning this link in the comments below so you have access to it, of a Dungeon Returns, which is 4 days before Christmas on December 21st, and it lasts the full 2-week cycle, including a special 3-day event January 5th through 8th, which has some new and awesome rewards, but also some serious anxiety-ridden difficulty if you get into the top rooms in the difficulty, whether it be Dungeon 1 through 6 or that oh-so-special Dungeon 7. So let's begin to read this Kabam Mike's post. Summoners, dungeons are coming back from December 21st at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time until January 8th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. In this iteration, we're going to be trying something new, but only for the final 3 days. The following changes will be live from January 5th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to January 8th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The rewards, this is what we care about most, right? The free stuff, or maybe not free, but hopefully not so heart-pounding that you start to give up. For the final 3 days of this iteration of Dungeons, you'll be able to find rank-up resources in the room rewards of certain rooms. Now, at first when I read that, I've got to be honest, I got really excited because I thought, oh, like rank-up gems? That's awesome. Not so fast. It's not those kind of rank-up rewards. It's more like catalysts, and we'll get into that. You'll be able to challenge yourselves over and over again to repeatedly get rewards in addition to the ones that you claim from milestones. You'll find catalysts, like I just said, and catalyst fragments in dungeon rooms 5, 7, 9, and 11, and 13. How odd, right? Somebody out there got that pun. By the way, if you are really struggling to form Tier 4 class Catalyst fragments, I do think this is going to be great for those middle class intermediate players who still have mostly, say, 4-star rank 440s and are just desperate to get their first or their second or their third rank 5 4-star champion, especially if you're looking to become uncollected. And I would say that the majority of messages I'm receiving in the background in the Line app right now are people who are sending me their rosters of mostly 440 champs asking if their roster is good enough to become uncollected, which is hard for me to say because if it was me, the answer would be absolutely not because my skill level was not nearly what it needed to be with 440s. Even with 550s, I was still struggling, but you might be better at the game than I am, and so I don't want to devalue you as well. But because of that, this kind of thing does help you get more fragments and catalysts to rank those 4 stars up to rank 5. Each dungeon difficulty rewards a different type of catalyst, with Dungeon 7 providing Tier 2 Alpha Catalyst shards. So Dungeon 7 is going to become even more valuable than before, and that was always the best value in terms of how many rooms you had to defeat versus the points that you had to get for max out the rank milestones. And now you're just looking forward to even more Tier 2 Alpha Catalyst shards. And I love Tier 2 Alphas. Of course, I need them constantly for everything from ranking up my 6-star Domino, hopefully one day, to ranking up more 5 stars to rank 4 and rank 5. So I'll take that and encourage it, even though there will be some pushback, as always, from people who say, well, the people who can only do Dungeon 6 and below are once again at a disadvantage. That's just the nature of the game and where it's going. The people at the top are going to progress faster. Kabam's got to keep them interested, and ranking up champions faster is the way to keep the people at the top interested, and so that's just the reality of the game right now. So the bigger challenges you defeat, the bigger your reward will be. Dungeon buffs. This is where it gets kind of scary and anxiety-ridden. The rewards are greater, but so is the danger, kind of like prom senior year if you were me. Dungeon difficulty will now escalate with additional buffs on opponents. The amount of buffs per link node will increase as you progress further into the dungeon, which makes sense. But this kind of reminds me, as I've read through it a couple of times, like a Modoc's Lab situation, except you don't have a randomizer. It's just one path or the other. And I would imagine that there are going to be some rooms that are such BS that no matter what node you choose, you're going to get wrecked. That's just the nature of the difficulty, and that's going to suck, but at the same time, it's going to be really rewarding to those of you who have the roster, the skills, and maybe even the items to defeat those nodes. Difficulties 1 through 6. So you're going to see that there are 10 plus rooms, like normal. Rooms 1 through 4 are still only 1 debuff, but rooms 5 through 6, 2 debuffs. Rooms 7 through 8, 3 debuffs. And then room 9, 4 buffs. And room 10 plus 5 buffs. So it's going to look, especially Dungeon 6, a lot more like Dungeon 7 when you hit rooms 5 and above. Now, speaking of Dungeon 7, that's going to start pretty routine with only 2 buffs, and I appreciate that it's rooms 1 through 6, because personally I've never made it past room 6 of Dungeon 7 without at least having to change a pair of pants. Now rooms 7 through 8, 3 debuffs, room 9, 4 debuffs, and then room 10, 5 buffs. I'm very curious. The people who are the best of the best at this game, and there are certainly plenty of them out there, will be doing videos that they challenge rooms 10 plus with this, so I'm really excited to see them take it on. I'll be bringing my popcorn, and most importantly, I will not be involved in that fiesta of random aggression and rage quitting. Refresh changes. Dungeons were previously updated from 1-day events to 3-day runs, but the refresh timers were never changed. For the first time ever, we're making Catalyst accessible in a way that they are almost infinitely grindable if you so choose. As such, we're updating the refresh times and costs. The following changes will be implemented for our champions to rest and recharge before challenging the dungeons once again. 1 and 2 star champions will have the same 5-hour refresh timer. 3-star champions, none of this matters because I'm guessing all of you are trying to bring at least your 4-star champions to dungeons, at least if you're not a newer player. 4-star champs, 44-hour refresh or 50 unit cost. And then 5-star champions, a 92-hour refresh or 80 unit cost, and then 6-star champions, 140-hour refresh or 120 unit cost. Now, 5 stars having a 92-hour refresh, that is a very, very long time. I would play dungeons on day 1 and I would use my 5 stars and then I just wouldn't play them again. And then when day 1 came in the next cycle, they were always ready to go. I read this and I interpret this as it will take 92 hours for them to refresh, which obviously is, it's more than 3 days. 24, 48, 72, 84, whew, that's a lot of hours. So what this is also forcing you to do, if you want to use those best champions, is to sacrifice the units to get them refreshed automatically. And 5 stars, 80 units, that's a pretty significant amount of units. And 6 stars, 120, pretty significant as well. So prepare to team up with new and old friends as you dive into the challenges waiting in the new dungeons. As a reminder, these changes will only be in effect January 5th. So hopefully that means that since it's the last 3 days of the challenge, you won't really have to worry about the initial 92-hour refresh time or the 140-hour refresh time, because by the time that your champions are ready to bring back, the dungeon will have ended and it'll probably take a 2-week break after January 5th like it does normally. But if that change is permanently added to the game and instead of your champions being free every 48 hours, you're having to wait what's essentially twice as many days for those 5 stars to be refreshed without unit cost. That's some pretty shady detail, I must say, in this changes. And it does say in the explanation, the following changes will be implemented for our champions to rest and recharge before challenging the dungeons once again. Our champions aren't Pokemon. They don't really need to rest and recharge. They don't need to get 8 hours of sleep. They're digital mobile video game characters that aren't real human beings. Shocker, I know. If that was a spoiler alert for some of you, I'm sorry about that. But regardless, that's my biggest complaint about these new changes, is if they're permanent and you don't get to use your best champs every 3 days, even if you join dungeons right when it starts in the first day of the cycle, you're really just going to not have as much motivation to do dungeons, because you're not going to be able to use your best champs. And when I say your best champs, of course, I mean the champions that you've spent the most time and money and resources putting into your A squad, your first string, whatever you want to call it. So there's a lot to take away from this, and I do think generally when it comes to tier 2 alpha shards, I'm going to be very excited about getting additional fragments in Dungeon 7, even when I get wrecked. But the refresh timers, it kind of bothers me. Maybe I'm reading this wrong, right? Maybe there's a chance that 92 hours doesn't mean 92 hours, and somehow you get to have them not have to quote unquote rest, but half that time. I would be okay if it was a 48-hour refresh. I would be fine with that. But 92 is such a long time. And you can see it's because they want to bait you into spending units to cut out those 92-hour refreshes. Especially if you are, I can see people really throwing units at this if they're very close to ranking up someone and they need one more tier 2 alpha catalyst to make like 4. This is just a way to take your units away and you grind for catalyst, and it's not necessarily going to be a wise decision to sacrifice that many units for refreshes just to get that specific amount of fragments or shards needed to rank up a champion. So we're going to have to do a separate video in January, I guess, that talks about whether or not it's even worth it to pay the units if you're stuck in that tough position of that's your best way to get tier 2 alphas, for example, whether or not it's better to just wait and get a better deal or Alliance Quest rewards in the Glory Store, for example, than it is to waste so many units on a immediate gratification of the resource that you need. So lots to talk about. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will be pinning this link to one of the comments as well so that you have access to it and you can read through it as well. As always, thanks for watching, YouTube.